Alrighty, well, welcome back to The Art of Show. Hanging out with someone super special today, Mr. Nick Patton, hardcore Packers fan, calling in all the way from Sheboygan, Wisconsin. I apologize about my accent because I have a pretty strong Southern one, I would imagine, especially up there. So, but welcome to the show.
Well, do I have an accent? People have told me that I have an accent too. So I don't know, more of a UP accent.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, but not as northern as I would have thought, or as Wisconsin as I would have thought. So.
Good. I've kind of worked my way out of that. That's good, because I went to New York when I was a kid and tried to order a pizza there, and they couldn't understand me. So we can, if I start talking about things that you don't understand, it's like what a bubbler is or frying out. Just let me know. I can translate.
Yeah, I have no clue what those are, so I'll definitely be sure to ask. Well, sweet. So we'd love to kind of dive into your journey. And for those that may not know, you definitely should know, Nick is the host of the Picturebooking podcast, which is amazing. And you're in the All the Wonders Network. Like, is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, I think so. I'm part of the network, I think is the official term, but it's very loose, especially for me personally. They kind of let me do what I want to do, which is great. They'll suggest guests, which is awesome, and they'll connect me to some awesome books. But they've kind of like let me alone. I'm kind of like that weird uncle that shows up every 2 weeks looking for food or something.
That's awesome.
So yeah, they've given me the freedom, and I still get to be associated with them, and it's such an awesome website. And,
yeah.
Matthew and Blake are good people, so I love being associated with them.
Yeah, that's really cool. So we know that picture books, children's books, are a huge part of your kind of life and your journey now. Was that something growing up as a kid? Did you like books, or how did that kind of enter your story?
No, I liked art. So picture books they were always around, and I always was looking at the images, and I loved, I was a big, play. So like, if you'd show me, you'd give me two of anything and I would make them talk. My daughter's the same way. You give her just some space and she's making like anything, little gummy bears talk and all that. So but as far as books go, we read a little bit, but I was never a strong reader. And I don't think it wasn't a passion. I remember, Wild Things being a book that I picked up and just loved. And then a book like John Sheska's, his stories just seemed to resonate with me as a kid. And I remember thinking as a kid, these are awesome. Like Three Little Pigs, I think, was the one that I first picked up. And I remember looking at it and thinking, this is awesome, but I'm too old for this.
Yeah.
And that's just an awful thing to say. But that was what was going through my head at the time. So yeah. That's cool. It wasn't like love, like library all the time. I interview people too, and I love those stories, but I went to the library every weekend. We read books all the time. They were around, but it wasn't the majority of my childhood. It wasn't something that I have fond memories of.
Gotcha. But you said art was something that was part of your childhood.
Yes.
What were you into? What did you draw?
It was probably, it would be like, my mom would come home she worked in the office, and she'd come home with reams of paper. So like old printer paper that was all connected. Mm-hmm. So there'd just be these huge reams of paper, and I'd be able to, I'd rip them off, and I would take like the coloring books or picture books or whatever that was around, and I would, take those characters and draw them again and make my own stories. So I was more interested in making my own thing, and I kind of still am more interested in making my own thing than, reading somebody else's.
That's cool. That's real cool.
Yeah.
So through high school, where'd you go to college?
I went to college at St. Omer College. So it's in De Pere, Wisconsin, which is Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's basically Green Bay. And that's where, so I went to school. It's a liberal arts school. Okay. So I got it wasn't just art that I went there for art, and I went there for design. But it's you get the holistic liberal arts training.
What was kind of your career path at that point? Like, what would you kind of go in college wanting to do?
Well, it was graphic design, and I can remember asking my mom, I loved art, I loved drawing, and I was good at it, and people said I was good at it, and so I remember asking her, what can you do with art? And she said, you can become a graphic designer. I was probably in middle school. I said, okay, I'm going to become a graphic designer. So, I mean, literally from that moment on, that's what I wanted to do. So I went in high school, I was looking for schools that had a good graphic design program, and that was my entire focus. So not fine art, not drawing, not illustration, none of that. It's stuff I love to do, but I never saw it as a possibility. So it's kind of unfortunate, but yeah. So I went to college to be a graphic designer and went through as a graphic designer and have a job now as a graphic designer.
That's cool. And in Desi, you're at St. Norbert. Is that how you say that?
Norbert.
Wow, I'm sorry, I missed an R there.
St. Norbert College. It's it's a good place, and I still work there. So my freshman year, I got connected with the athletic department and started working on some of their print materials. And from there, I got an internship in the communication office. And then after I graduated, they hired me full time.
Okay, cool.
So it's kind of like this is my home.
Yeah.
We're at St. Norbert right now. This is the studio here. This is more my home than any place else. I've spent the majority of my life on this campus.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So how did the Norby and the college mascot, how did that come about?
Well, when I went to school here, they had a athletic logo, and they were always the Green Knights. So they had an athletic logo. And then when I went to the communication team, we had a conversation about updating that logo. It was literally a hand-drawn logo from the 80s. Okay. So it had clouds in it, and it was like a horse charging knight, and it needed, obviously they needed a vector version. Like some kid came up with a vector version. So we, one of the goals that we had is to just update that brand. So I got to be the lead designer on that, and we updated the school's Green Knight identity brand. And from there, we just sort of built off of it. We, a couple of years after that, because when you update, I don't know if you know this, but if you're in the college world, updating an athletic brand is always tricky business.
Yeah, it mentions a lot of money, and people are associated with it. And
Yep. People, I remember going to meetings, talking about the old stuff and saying why we needed to update it, and just people were just furious. This is their mark. This is, it's sacred to a lot of these people. So,
did you get any death threats?
No death threats. Nobody tore up their diploma in front of main hall, but stuff like that happens.
That's awesome. Yeah.
When you touch some of these things that people hold sacred. But we got through it. At the end, everybody liked the product that came out of it. And we had these new marks. And from there, we just thought, well, how do we build out the Knight brand? And so we actually made a mascot. Before that, maybe somebody had a Knight costume that they'd run around with, but I got to develop a character and develop a mascot. And so that became Norby Knight. And then once the mascot was made and out there, we said, what next? And we thought about, merchandising. So we did a Norby doll, a plush doll, and that went over really well. And then we said, what's next? And I was already into picture books, and picture books were the thing. And I was sort of waiting for the right time to pitch it to the college. And after the doll came out and was successful, I pitched the story, and it got accepted, and they ran with it, and we're still selling them, selling a lot of them today.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So you said that picture books became part of your story going into Norby. How did that come about, or how'd that enter in? Was that in
Well,
college?
that was not till after college,
Okay.
but right after college. So I was all focused, like narrowly focused on becoming a graphic designer. And then I became a graphic designer, and I got a job that I really liked with a company that I really liked, working on material that I really thought was important. I said, okay, now what? This is what I wanted. Now what? And I needed another goal. And at that time, my friend had her first child. So I went to just randomly to go get a gift, for the kid, not knowing anything about babies. I was in Barnes and Noble looking at the first time ever looking in the kids section and of kids books, and I ran across Mo Willems' Pigeon books, and basically that was it. I'm done. I was laughing in the middle of the store,
Yeah.
and I was, then you remember the Sheska books, and it all just came flooding back to me as like, this is amazing. It brings together everything I love. There's art, there's story in this complete package. It just seemed like the ultimate project, and I was just instantly in love with it, and freaking out about how do you get into this? How do you learn about this? How do I make my own stories? So I kind of reverted back to when I was a little kid with that ream of paper. I was back to making my own stories like almost instantly, and trying to find ways to share those stories and get them published.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what was it like then? You've got the spark and you've got the opportunity to make a book, but I'm guessing, was this kind of the first one that you had gone through? Like, was this even the first time you made like a dummy for a book? What was that process like? Okay.
Yeah, I was, so it was probably, oh boy. So I graduated in 2003, and so this probably 2004 I got into picture books, and it wasn't until 2013 that we published Norby.
Okay.
So there's that long period where I was writing my own stories and still struggling with learning how reading books, taking some courses, showing my portfolio and all that stuff, and which I'm still doing. I'm still doing all that stuff. So there was a long period before so by the time I got to pitch that story, I kind of knew what I was doing.
Gotcha.
I've made a couple dummies before, nothing that I felt was ever finished completely. So Norby was the first story that I got to have the idea and enough discipline to finish all the way through. And you do this. You work on personal projects that you finish all the way through, which is great. For me, I just felt like when it got rejected or all the feedback, I would just go on to the next story.
Uh-huh.
I never finished anything. So Norby was really the first one where from start to finish, I did it.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
All right, so that was, you said 2000. What year was that it came out?
2013.
2013. And then did you start the Picturebooking podcast in 15? Is that right?
In 14.
14. Okay.
So
how did
2014.
How did that come about?
So when you have a book come out and you have like a support of the college, you get to do lots of these fun events. So I got we have an St. Norbert College SNC. So we have an SNC day where I got to do this big presentation packed. I packed it with my friends, and then whoever was coming in, I'm like, you got to be here. I'm not doing this in front of an empty audience. But, and I got to go to schools, and I, did a bunch of events, and it was so much fun, and feeling like you're an author and illustrator, and getting out there in front of kids and experiencing like all the fun things that come with making a book. And then it ends and it's over. And I didn't have another book lined up to pitch. I was really thinking, well, what am I going to do? I really love doing these presentations. I really loved, promoting this book, and to go back to the grind of the website and the blog. And I was I needed something that had a little more juice to it.
Yeah.
And, the podcast was the solution, the fix of getting to talk picture books, getting to talk to creative people, getting to promote books that I love. I really thought that would be a great opportunity to do that, and it's turned out that way.
Yeah, yeah. So who's your first guest that you had on, or maybe who was the first interview that you had on?
Airlie Anderson was the first one,
Okay.
and I think people probably think that like I had a relationship before with her or something. Like you'd pick somebody who you've met and from the industry. Nah. I just randomly emailed a couple people, and they all said yes, and she was the first one that we lined up, just because I liked her book, and it was this amazing thing where you just send an email out to somebody randomly, and pretty soon you're having this amazing conversation with them.
That's cool.
Magical. And she was a great first guest because I didn't know what I was doing, and she really was polished, and she knew how to do an interview, so she could smooth out the rough edges.
Yeah, yeah. So what's been? Do you have a favorite episode when you think back on them, or is that like picking a favorite kid?
I don't know. You know what the deal with? I don't know how you feel about this, because how many episodes have you done so far?
Oh gosh, I think this is one right. This was right 36, I think. So
36.
Yeah.
So I feel like the first 20 were like really precious, and everyone was this huge deal, and then I feel like they all blur together.
Yeah.
I feel like they just keep coming, and I have these amazing conversations, and I'm so focused on them. And then as soon as the interview's over, all my focus goes to the next interview. But the first 20, I feel like are, kind of special for me. The Dan Santat one, I guess, is probably, I think it was episode 20, where literally we had a conversation, and then 2 weeks later he won the Caldecott. And then like a couple days later, I got to post the interview.
That's cool.
So, that was the one. And then recently, I would say, Ketty, I'm going to screw up her name. What's her name? Let me just, Chen is her last name. Her interview, Karina, I'm going to screw that up.
Okay.
Chen. Her talk was just so much fun. We talked about dancing and a whole bunch of random things and just her process into becoming an illustrator in her life was just so interesting. That's probably the one that recently, that was episode 78.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
For those that are listening, I imagine a lot of the folks listening also listen to yours, but is there maybe one episode you'd recommend to start with, or just have them go back to the beginning?
I feel like you don't have to go back to the beginning. I feel like you could probably jump in wherever you want to. I'd scroll through, and if you see somebody who you really admire, you see a book that you really like, I'd start there. It's not chronological in any way. There's, maybe you get a little bit, sometimes you get a little bit of what's going on in my life, but, otherwise, I would just jump in, read the list of names, see who's interesting, and I don't think you need to do them in order by any means.
That's cool. That's real cool. I think the Dan Santat one was the first one I'd listened to, and I was like, oh, he just won the Caldecott. This is really cool. So that was neat. And then the one, I mean, when you had him on just a few weeks ago, that one was pretty insane. So that was a good one too.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it's interesting. You're like, I mean, I love his books, and he's one of my favorite guys, and he was so personal, and we got into some really deep stuff and really personal stuff. And I think what interviews like that make me think about a lot of things, like make me think about a lot of, like, why are we making art, and what's important, and is this, I mean, it literally makes me think, is this something I want for myself? Am I willing to give as much as that guy gives?
Yeah.
It is that he is an intense guy, and that interview messed me up.
Yeah, because
The latest one is.
I hadn't listened to it, but I saw like all your tweets about it. I'm like, man, what is going on with this? And so, but then I listened. I was like, oh, so that's the story behind After the Fall. So, but that was pretty cool. But any of the other episodes are now you're still doing your own illustrations, is that right? And working on your own pitches and stuff. Did I say can drafts draw? Is that something you're working on now?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm working on that now. It doesn't have a home. So, but what I'm doing is I'm just gonna go through and make the story from start to finish. So so that's the one that I'm eventually gonna to pitch out to publishers. And then if nothing bites there, then maybe I'll lean on guys like you and see about the self-publishing stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah.
I'm gonna see how that goes. You know, I really like what I'm doing with it. I've spent a long time with that story, and it's just a story that I just need to finish.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, what's your? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
When you talk about interviews like the Jake Parker interview, where he says, you know, you just got to make stuff and finish it. I think, you know, I think about that, and I know that's what needs to happen here.
Yeah, that's cool. So your process, is that one in Illustrator? Are those vector graphics, or do you work in Photoshop, or kind of what's your process?
All the above.
Okay.
I decided that I was going to use everything I have to make the art. So if I work at my day job as a graphic designer, I work a ton in InDesign, which InDesign would be the program that the layout artists would use in any picture book. So I start in InDesign now, and I'll jump to Illustrator to get colors and shapes right, and then I'll finish in Photoshop. And I might jump to Photoshop to do some drawing and then bring it back into Illustrator. I have decided that I'm really good in with the pen tool. So, and because I make, you know, I've made logos for years, and I've decided I kind of want my images to be more graphic, and to have a little more of that finish to it. But then in the final version, I throw it into Photoshop, and then I've been messing with traditional stuff, then bringing it into Photoshop to do some coloring. And so, yeah, I'm still working it out. And what I'm doing, and I don't know if this is good or not, but this is what I'm doing, is I'm starting with the cover, and I did the cover a different way in that story, finished it. And I thought, well, what if I switched it up? And the cover was all done traditionally, and then with pencil. And then the second one I did a little differently. And then I'm like, well, what if I use a pencil in Photoshop? And I tried that for the third spread. And the fourth spread, I brought in some different elements. So I'm just keep going down, trying to figure out what this thing should look like. And hopefully by the end of the book, I have like one style or one way of executing it. And then I can go back and finish the rest of them that way.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat. I feel like every drawing I do is like some different way. And I'm like, because I see like a book and I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, let me try to make it like that. And then you're like, this doesn't quite work for me. But
yeah, and I think that instead of like, you know, I could get stuck and say, well, I want to try this thing, so I have to go back to that first drawing and do it. No, I'm just gonna keep going.
Yeah. And
we'll figure it out at the end. There's 32 pages. There's tons of opportunity to switch it up. And, you know, I mean, I don't know about you, but when I study, you know, when you have an author on and you're studying their work, and then you're like, oh, I've got to try. I'm like, I got to try that out.
Yeah.
And I got to see how to incorporate that into it, and see if I like it. And I think I at this point in my life, I got to give that a go. I've got to try everything. I got to open it all up and let it all spill out.
Yeah, that's cool.
So my dummies, I think, is going to be like this. It's going to look every spread might look finished, but it's going to have a different feel
style.
to it.
Yeah, it's like
why not?
Pick the version that you want, and I'll finish the rest. Yeah, that's cool. So your story ideas, do you start kind of with the seed of a story, or do you start with a character? Kind of how does that work for you?
Yeah, I think it's probably a story idea, and It usually comes in the car. I have a long commute to my work, and so I listen to a ton of podcasts and a ton of books on tape, and I'll hear a different idea, and I'll think, wow, I love to explore that. I love to learn that, and part of learning would be, like maybe creating a story around that idea or something like that. The other thing I like to do is mash up. Yeah, I like mashups. So taking an old story and making it and putting it in a new setting. My Norby book is a mashup between St. Norbert College and college life and obviously a mascot and the story of the stonecutter. I don't know if you know that story,
Yeah.
but it's an old ancient story. And so how does this? I mashed up those two ideas of how could we do a stonecutter story inside of a college like this. So Norby, he wants to be a student, and he gets to become a student, and so on and so forth. So I love making stories like that are kind of like mashups.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. So, are there illustrators now or authors now? Like, who are the folks that you kind of look to for inspiration, or some of your favorites, just in general?
Well, I think Peter Brown probably is the guy that his books, and Dan Santak. I mean, those guys. Every time I pick up a Peter Brown book, it's just something special, I think. So I really and I love Peter's the way he's illustrating now. I love Mr. Tiger Goes Wild. Is the way that book looks is amazing to me. I think it's so graphic, and it still has that element of traditional media that makes it so tactile and interesting. Yeah, his stuff. And then there's so many. Charles Santos, I had him on right as my son was born, so it's kind of a blur interview. But when his work is just amazing too, and he does so many different styles and is able to illustrate a guy who can. You're not picking Charles to do a book for a certain style. You're picking Charles because he's a great artist, and he's going to come to that story and make it his own with maybe something completely different than he's ever done before. Yeah, and his work is pretty fun. And there's so many. Catherine Roy, I mean, obviously, and then there's the Molly Idols and of the world, and yeah, there's so many. It's just a good time. It's a good time to be looking at art because there's so many great authors and illustrators working right now.
Yeah, it's so cool. So kind of looking at your, I guess, podcast as a whole, are there some things about just maybe the kids book industry or that whole world, these things you didn't realize before going into it that now you're like, oh, I had no clue that was kind of part of what they do?
I would think the thing that surprised me the most is when I started the podcast, I didn't realize how business to business this industry is. I just feel like this is the traditional publishing industry. I feel is extraordinarily business to business, and it makes sense because your final audience, the kids, aren't going and picking up books from the store. There's not a direct line there. So you need this medium person, the librarian, the teacher to really champion books and to get books in kids' hands. And because of that, it can be a really closed off industry where you really need these librarians to be out there championing your book if you want to have success. And it just causes it so things like self-publishing really hamper. I mean, you tell me, you've done it more than I have, but it's really hard to break in to like a library and to get in front because there's these tracks that books go through and processes they go through. and I had no idea about that.
Yeah. Yeah. That was something big as I was looking into it. I was like, man, like you really gotta know people. And then when you start like talking to people, you're like, everybody's like connected and you're like, how do I get in this world and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the self-publishing for me has just been almost like, if I'm going to spend all this time on a dummy, like let me at least get it out in front of like parents at least to get like feedback. Cause like, I know I'm not at the place where I don't think I could get anybody to pick anything up yet. And so that's been kind of fun, just as it's almost kind of working and improving just in very public, which has been cool. So,
oh, I love that. And I think that's the way to go. I mean, I really want to support, people who are doing that stuff, because I think there's so much juice to that. And it would be great if there was a tipping point where, you could see a little more of that hit the market, but I don't think it's there yet.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, like I said, I just feel like it's a pretty closed off industry. So yeah, but I think for somebody who's growing, I would recommend it. I mean, you need to finish stuff. And to finish something and to throw it in a drawer is depressing.
Yeah.
You need to show it. And there are ways to show your stuff, and guys like you are out there doing it. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, totally.
So are you are you saying right from the beginning this is going to be self-published, or are you saying I'm going to send this out, see if it gets any bites, see if we can work on it with a publisher, and if that doesn't happen, then I'm going to self-publish?
Initially, I just kind of went to straight through with the ones I'm doing
Sure.
right now, just because I still don't feel like I'm the story or the illustration side of things. Like I don't know, maybe I'm just nervous. Like I don't feel like I'm at the point to where like I could even pitch like an agent, like, hey, try this out. So, but I think going maybe into next year, I think there's gonna be a couple where like I'm gonna hold this and still work on it and start kind of that whole process of that world. But I don't know, I think doing stuff on the side's fun too, because like you get to talk directly, not to the readers, but a lot of times just to the parents. And so like I'll get like an email from a parent saying, hey, I just did this, like maybe you should do this in your next story. I'm like, all right, and then I do it on the next story. So you can work a lot faster, which is fun. But yeah, the because I definitely want to have like an idea that's just for the traditional side of things,
Sure.
and then work on that. But
Sure. Hey, that's great, man. I love that. I think that's important. But I also think you should, I think you should hold some stuff back and try it. And we all need to get out there. And I think I haven't listened to all of your stuff, but I listened to a couple podcasts that you've done and looked at your stuff. And sometimes I think you use the term, how do you say it? You don't call yourself an author and illustrator yet. You say you're like working towards it.
Oh yeah. In
progress
or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. I have that niche too, where I like in the beginning of my podcast it says author. Here's your host, author, illustrator, and host. And I'm like, well, I haven't done anything recently. Can I really still say that? And I think it's important for a guy like me and a guy like you who are publicly out here just to say that, yeah, we are authors and illustrators. We are doing the work. We don't have to, I think we need to give ourselves permission to call ourselves that, even if we don't have the traditional book being published every year. I just think it's important to call it what it is. I mean, you're making books for kids. You're doing the job. You're an author and an illustrator, so I don't know. I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, that's awesome. I appreciate it. I will start doing that. So I'll be like, hey, Nick told me to do it. So if you got a problem, look him up.
Yeah,
so.
Come to me. I'm ready to fight.
That's cool.
To fight anybody.
Well, sweet. Well, as we're kind of wrapping up, as far as the podcast is concerned, is there anything maybe you're excited for in the future, or some guests you have coming on that you want to make sure people definitely pay attention to?
Yeah, sure. Well, Aaron Reynolds is going to come. He's the next one scheduled to be released. So I don't know when this podcast comes out, but his will be right around the beginning of August.
Okay, yeah, this will come out at the time of this recording. This will come out next Friday, so about a week and a half.
So yeah, so the next picture booking will be with Aaron, and you had him on.
Yeah, he's fun
recently too. So I got to do a little bit of research by listening to your podcast, listening to your interview with him. So we had a good time. He's a good guy. And then throughout, let's see who else is coming on. Let me see. Steve Weinenberg is going to be on. He's John Sheska's. This is always confusing. I always screw this up. He's John Sheska's son-in-law.
Oh wow!
Did you know John Sheska's son-in-law writes and illustrates picture books?
No,
it seems like. Imagine, yes, yeah, he does, and he's got some amazing books.
Yeah.
So he's going to be on later this fall. Catherine Roy she was on a couple years ago. We're going to have her back on this fall too for How to Be an Elephant, which is an amazing book. I'm so excited to promote that. Her illustrations in there are just they're fantastic. As a designer, her nonfiction picture books now, the shark one and this elephant one, are just amazing feats of design and illustration and putting it all together, and then in this package that is just it's so good.
That's cool.
JC Leindecker, that's what it looks like. I mean that's what some of those elephant images looks like. It looks like JC Leindecker. It's so good.
That's cool. That's really cool. Well, sweet. Well, as we're wrapping up, picture booking, is it just picturebooking.com? Is that what's the best place? Okay.
I would, and if you don't know it, I kind of got rid of picturebooking.com. So what'll happen when you go to picturebooking.com, it'll jump you to All the Wonders now.
Okay, cool.
And the home there. It was just I made a business decision that I was maintaining two websites, the one on All the Wonders and the one at Picturebooking, and I'm all in at All the Wonders. So,
awesome.
But you can just go to picturebooking.com, and that'll jump you right to it.
Cool. And what about your work and the stuff you got going on? Any good place people can follow you?
No. No, I would you can just look me up on maybe Twitter is probably the best place. I try to do Instagram, and it's fun. And there is nickpatton.com. But with my websites, with my decision to get rid of picture booking, Nick Patton was part of that, and I'm not exactly sure. It's going to get blown away pretty soon, just because I stopped paying the host. So I have to figure out a new home for it and how that's going to look.
Gotcha.
And since I'm not pushing anything right now of my own stuff, just trying to finish this dummy book, I don't know where to send you guys. You're going to have to wait.
Okay.
Just pay attention to the podcast.
Yeah, there you go. That's a perfect place to go. Well, man, I appreciate your time. It was fun talking with someone who does some of the same stuff I do too, which is a blast. So, and I think your podcast is what inspired me just to get going and doing something in illustration and picture book world and all that kind of stuff. So thanks for doing that. It's been awesome. Well,
man, before we sign off here, I just want to tell you that, just thank you for inviting me onto this. I mean, the work that you're doing here in this, I've listened to your interviews, and they're really good, and they're really important that, we have more voices out here, and a guy that's trying some different things. So, I mean, I just encourage you. I mean, I'm thankful that you invited me on, and I just encourage you to keep going, man. This is some really good stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Stuff. That's cool. Well, good stuff. Well, thank you.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah.